So smells, our second special sense we're going to look at. And remember, we talked about this when we were discussing cranial nerves and how this is the only cranial nerve or nerve in the whole body that actually projects outside the body proper, right? So it's in this space known as the nasal cavity. This is the actual nerve. It synapses in the olfactory bulb, and then the olfactory tract takes over. But here is the raw nerve, and this is the process of smell called olfaction. There's about 10 to 20 million olfactory cells, and on average we can distinguish almost about 3,000 odors. Once again, you have super smellers, super sniffers, and those who can't smell so well. All right, so discrimination, again, the process is not completely understood exactly how we get smell, but there's a lot of research going on about that. And it's determined that it's what smell receptors are being activated and what the pattern of activation is inside the nasal cavity. There's a lot of turnover of these smell receptors. It's very rapid. But of course, as you age, this goes down, and thus it might be why grandma puts on an inordinate amount of perfume, because she just can't smell it simply. I mean, that's the reason. And she can't smell it well enough unless she puts on an extra heavy dose. And meanwhile, you're about to pass out because that perfume is really powerful. Of course, I know a lot of students that do that too, so I can't say too much. So here is what the nasal mucosa looks like. We have the neurons, right? Here's our cell bodies right here. Here's the extension out here, these so-called olfactory hairs that are going to interact with the molecules of smell, if you will. They're tucked in this little mucosated layer right here along the cribriform plate. This is the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone, where the fibers are projecting through, the axons that project backward into the olfactory bulb. Here's where the synapses can occur. So a molecule interacts with the olfactory hair, activates it. This stimulates the cell that will produce an action potential in response, and that action potential is delivered. You can see how groups of axon endings are clumped together, and this is why it may be important for the particular pattern to lead to a smell rather than just an individual neuron that's causing it. All right, so you can see each neural cell body, the ending has about 10 to 20 of these so-called hairs projecting from it that are going to interact with the odorant molecules, and they lie in this mucosated layer. So the basal end of each cell becomes an axon, so this layer will become an axon. There are going to pass through the cribriform plate and then are going to collect together into the olfactory bulb. Now, there's somewhat controversy. I've been reading a book and almost done with it that talks about that where our sense of smell is not as poor as one might think. There are two types of smell that occur. There's the smell that's brought about from what's called orthonasal projection, your normal breathing in, and in other animals it absolutely is superior to ours. But there's also a smell associated with taste sensation called retronasal, where we breathe out molecules. And apparently our retronasal smell is very heightened compared to other animals, much better than even dogs have in terms of smell capabilities. Their orthonasal, when they breathe through, is vastly superior to ours. But retronasally, we are superior to dogs. So it may not be, don't believe everything you see on the press and in little newspaper articles. Certainly it's true, women are more sensitive to odors than men, and it may be important in social interaction, may not be. There's still a lot of research going on with that. So we know that they bind to receptors on the olfactory hairs. These will open channels for sodium or calcium to flow through. This will depolarize the membrane, will lead to the generation of a potential that will then rely on some stimulus occurring inside the olfactory bulb. Remember, this is not sent to the thalamus. This is the one sense that doesn't immediately travel to the thalamus. Olfactory receptors can quickly adapt Think about if you've ever traveled somewhere, when you first get off the plane or the bus, there may be a peculiar odor associated with a particular location, but after a few minutes, hours, you'll become adapted to it. It doesn't bother you in the least, and that's called adaptation. Some odorants can act on pain receptors, and so we know that ammonia salts can be used to revive somebody. Capsaicin can have pain when it is too hot. And you can detect, ooh, those chili peppers are really hot, right? So, and that's where capsaicin is found in. Body odors may affect sexual behavior. We talked early on about the merocrine sweat glands and the apocrine sweat glands. Merocrine sweat glands work from the very beginning, produce sweat, no problems. But the apocrine comes on about puberty, releases a muskier, thicker type of sweat and product. And so this may have something to do with pheromones, even though we don't specifically have the area or the equipment that other animals have to detect pheromones. There may be another method involved, and we just don't know yet how significant pheromones are upon people's physiology. There are hints that it does have some influence, but nothing particularly definitive yet. However, it is known that men seem to influence female ovulation, so it's perhaps something to do with testosterone. And it's also known that vaginal secretions from females can raise testosterone levels in men, so it may be this back and forth kind of technique. Who knows? Who knows if the makers of Axe spray really have anything to claim? We'll see. Here are the projection pathways for smell information. So here is our olfactory bulb projecting backwards into the primary olfactory cortex. Again, the thalamus is not involved at this particular stage, and you can see the major projection out to the orbitofrontal cortex, which is where smell is going to project to, and that's why taste is going to be projected to, and that's why smell has such a profound effect upon taste.